Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Super Paranormal Chronicles. Today, I'm delighted to be talking to Pat Fitzhugh, who's an author, researcher, paranormal adventurer, and he specialises in the Blair Witch. Pat, welcome. Good evening.
Hey, well, thank you, and good evening to you, Lee. How are you doing this evening?
Not too bad at all. Thanks very much. I've had a pretty quiet day. What about yourself?
Oh, I've had a pretty busy day. Pretty busy for sure, and it's been really hot here in the Middle Tennessee area, so I've just been busy trying to keep cool and do all the other chores.
Yeah, I can so relate. It's not too bad. It's been, you guys use Fahrenheit, so it's probably been about 60 to 70 degrees here. But I live in an apartment block. I've got the balcony door open. Fans are going. Yeah, so not too bad, really. So, what we'll do, if you can just start off by giving me a little bit of background about yourself, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, well, I'm from here in Middle Tennessee, and I'm in my 47th year of researching the Bell Witch legend of Middle Tennessee. I've written a couple of books on it. I've done some contributing author work for some other paranormal books, and I also have a book out about ghost stories and weird stories from around the southeastern U.S. But the Bell Witch has always been a pet project.
So let's jump straight into it. What got you interested with the Bell Witch?
Well, when I was a very small child, my mother would read me different stories to help me try to go to sleep at night. And one night she read from a book about the Bell Witch. Now, whether she thought that would put me to sleep, I don't know. But I actually did fall asleep pretty soon because my mind was just racing, trying to figure out how all of that could have happened or whether it was true or not. So that was the first thing. I really liked that story. And as time went on, my mother explained to me that she had gone to school with some of the descendants of that family and others that are involved
Wow.
in that legend. And that shocked me because I figured it probably did not even involve real people, but this involved real people and real places. So my interest just, kind of sprang from there. And I got a hold of some more books about it. I read about it there. And when I was a teenager, I began researching it seriously in terms of trying to find out what that little seed was that was planted at Red River that gave rise to this fascinating and often controversial legend.
Yeah, because I've done some research, probably not as much as you, because I've only had a couple of days. But from what I understand, the Bell family of Adams, Tennessee, and it was 1817 to 1821. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It's the Bell family. And at that time, it was called the Red River Settlement. Adams didn't come into existence until somewhere around 1859, but it was the John
Right.
Bell family of the Red River Settlement.
And
1817 to 1821 is the time period most often associated with the legend.
right. And what was it that actually kicked this story off?
Well, what kicked it off was when the father of the family, John Bell, was out inspecting his cornfield one day and came upon this strange looking animal that he had never seen before. He didn't know what to think of it. He had later described it as having the head of a rabbit and the body of a dog. And he took aim to try to shoot the thing. And when he pointed his gun at it, it vanished into thin air. And there were some other early apparitions, what we would call maybe trickster or shapeshifter entity type apparitions. And then after a while, the family began hearing knocks and bangs at the doors and walls of their log home, began seeing strange looking lights dancing in the fields or dancing near the fields back in the woods. And everything just started from there and became worse over time. And more disturbance types entered the picture as time went on. It was as though this thing fed off of the fear that people had, the collective fear, and just grew from there.
And this is really interesting because yeah, the start of the 1800s, you know, you've got places like Salem that had their witch hunts, and you had the same in the UK. So, why do you think that the Bell Witch became such a big story as what it is now?
Well, folklore, embellishments, and just the fascination with the unknown. I mean, everybody loves a good whodunit mystery. Over the years, many different theories have been put forward, both paranormal theories and human theories, but it's impossible for anyone to prove with absolute certainty what gave rise to this legend or what really happened. So all we can do is put theories to it. And there have been a lot of theories. Most all of the theories, I would say about 95%, have been debunked and don't hold water at all. Then there are a few that I think could provide a plausible explanation as to what might have happened back then to start it. And I think that mystery and intrigue that goes along with the legend, along with the story being retold down through the generations, that has really caused the legend, it caused it to take hold, and it grows with each telling of the story and with each person who feels that they've had an encounter that might be related to the Bell Witch.
Right. So, is that location of where this incident happened still there, or yeah, if it's been knocked down, what's on that location today?
Okay, well, it was a large farm. It was a total of 320 acres at one time, and it has since been subdivided many different ways. There is one tract of land in particular that had the Bell family home, which of course is no longer there, the family well, and the family graveyard. Another large tract of land, about 110 acres, I believe, is the tract of land on the northwest section of the farm where the Bell Witch Cave is. So those two things, like the cave and then the site of where the home was, those are the most prominent parts of what was once the old Bell Farm. Now, the tract with the home and the well and the graveyard, the graveyard's up in the woods, the home and the well, that is now a field where I believe they raise tobacco or maybe corn or soybeans or something. And that tract of land actually still remains in the Bell family through a trust.
Okay, so now that it's kind of changed direction from what it used to be, are you aware of any modern day uh, experiences that have happened within that area?
Oh, people report encounters all the time. I don't know that those encounters are related to the Bell Witch because there were so many other things going on back in olden times in that area. But, there's no shortage of encounters. One in particular is when people take photographs in the area and the photographs are anomalous. Sometimes there will be an apparition or what might be an apparition in the photo that was not seen when the photo was taken. Other times, a photo can be taken of a some item or something there in the area, some location, and no matter how many times the person took the photo, it would not come out properly. And other people would try to photograph the same thing and it wouldn't come out properly for them too. But if they photographed something next to it, it would always turn out fine. So that's one big thing there. Another thing is with the cave. The Blair Witch Cave and Farm is open for tours, and a lot of people over the years have talked about taking small rocks from the cave as souvenirs of their trip and tour, only to return those rocks sometime later after having experienced a very bad or very harrowing period of bad luck. Bad luck that did not befall them until they took the rocks from the cave. So, yeah, all kinds of encounters and anomalies there. But the two I mentioned, I think, are the most prominent, the
Right.
most talked about and most heard.
Okay. So this is going to sound a silly question, but I assume that you've been to the cave.
Yes, I sure have. In
So,
fact, I was up there probably 2 weeks ago.
and I'm assuming you didn't bring any pebbles or rocks.
No, I
Out.
didn't.
Yeah, yeah. So, what kind of location is this cave? Is it a big cave, small cave? Yeah. You said that there's tours that go on. Can you describe that cave for me?
Well, I can try. I am no expert on caves. This cave is, I believe, called a karst cave, Karst. There, it is part of what is believed to be a much larger or a large network of caves in the area. When you enter the Blair Witch Cave, you will go down a very narrow corridor and then come out into the first room, which I would say is pretty good size. It would holds, I don't know, probably 30 people if you stuff them in there. Then you go back down another very narrow corridor, and then you get into what I believe is called the back room, which is about as far as someone can go safely without being, experienced at caving or having a lot of light. And at the end, back of that second room, among the many different really cool rock formations, there's a big formation that looks like the front of an eagle, and they call that Eagle Rock.
Okay.
The
So,
cave maintains a certain temperature year round. I think it's could be like 58 to 59 degrees, something like that. And the story has it that the Bells used that cave for storage. What they stored in there, I don't know. Maybe they stored food. I'm not sure, food, drinks, or something, but I've heard that the Bells used it for storage.
right.
Also, the cave is below what is believed to be a Native American burial ground. Some archaeologists and historical people did verify that. So, yes, there's Native American graves nearby as well.
Okay. So, have you experienced anything when you've been visiting there?
At the cave, personally, nothing happened to me, but I've been there when things have happened to other people. For example, on one occasion, I was down there taking a tour, and this has been probably 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And one of the people taking the tour, a young guy, probably in his, I guess, his mid 20s or so, saying that somebody or something kept poking him there in the first room of the cave. And then he started, mentioning about he felt this really cold sensation right up against his neck. He didn't know what it was, but it was like a nail or a needle or something very cold trying to pierce the skin on his neck. Well, that was interesting, but I really didn't think much more about it because, when people go into places that are reputedly haunted and other people have had issues, sometimes the power of suggestion comes in, and even a normal or natural feeling could be misinterpreted as an anomaly. So after we finished that tour and got up to the top of the hill up there by the cave, and we were all standing around talking, and the guy kept on and on about it, and he offered to let me touch his neck where he felt that sensation because he said it still felt really cold. And I put my finger on the spot that he guided it to, and sure enough, his neck in that one very tiny spot, no bigger round than the end of my finger, was ice cold.
That's crazy.
Right. Now, whether that was the Bell Witch, whether it was something of a Native American origin, whether it was something medical, I don't know. But I thought that was very, very eerie. And it made me believe more about the other things he said that happened, where he had heard some whispers in there and felt at one time like something had its hand on his back, like it was just about to push him, but didn't. So that was that encounter there at the cave that I was around. As far as my own encounters, I've been up to Adams a few times over the years where strange things have happened. I've talked about those in books on interviews before. I think one of the most bizarre things was when I was working on a Bell Witch documentary video. This was probably about 1998, 1989. And I had a nice, fancy video camera. At least for those days, it was nice and fancy.
Yeah.
Had the tape and all the other stuff. And I was going to shoot some background stuff, or what we would call B-roll.
Yeah.
And I parked beside the highway, and there was a field, and I decided I would stand there beside of it and on the shoulder of the road and just do a few quick videos of the field, trying to capture what the fields and the countryside of northwestern Robertson County looked like. Well, as I got my camera ready to film, I noticed these three little rabbits. I wouldn't call them babies, but they weren't fully grown either, in the field, probably 40, 50 feet away from me, running around in circles, playing with each other. I thought that was kind of cute, so I thought, what the heck? So I hit record on the camera and I began to film them. And they played and played. It was almost as though they knew I had a camera on them, because they played even harder and even came a little closer when I started recording. So then I
Could
turned off the recorder and made a bunch of noises and acted silly, to scare them away, or get them to move so I could, just shoot my B-roll of the field. Well, that evening, after I arrived back home and started going through all the video I had shot, the clip where I had recorded with the rabbits was still there on the tape, but the rabbits themselves were missing. And
That's
I
weird.
was, the video showed my camera basically slowly following a certain area of the field around in circles where the rabbits were, but those rabbits were not in that video. They had vanished.
That must have blown your mind.
Well, you know, it, I don't know, it blew my mind. I mean, yeah, it was very surprising, but I'm one of these people that's like, okay, this is strange. I just don't believe this. Show me what happened.
Yeah.
Well, I couldn't think of anything that happened. And over the years since then, I've only had one person offer up an explanation, and they weren't even sure. They just suggested, a possibility that perhaps there had been something on the film before then, and this filmed over the top of it, and whatever had been on the film beforehand, right at that very point where I did the rabbits, and at no other point happened to make it appear as the rabbits weren't there anymore. But that was just a suggestion. Now, let's go back and tie this to the Bell Witch. Early accounts of the Bell Witch talked about how this thing, or talked about how people would encounter rabbits or see rabbits and be talking about their encounters with rabbits there around Red River. And the so-called Witch entity would speak up and say, that rabbit was me, or I was that rabbit. So this thing, and then we go back to the John Bell example at the very beginning, seeing the half dog, half rabbit. It seemed that this thing, according to the Blair Witch folklore, manifested often in the form of a rabbit. So that's what really made this eerie. It's because I
Yeah,
got out of the car to shoot the video and I didn't see the rabbits, and all of a sudden I did. And then they vanished from the final product video. So I thought that was
yeah,
very eerie.
yeah, that's for sure. So, with regard to the fact that you've done all this research with regard to the Bell Witch, would you call yourself a believer of the paranormal or a skeptic?
Well, I can't lay claim to either one because I hold myself out as a balanced researcher, free of any bias. I'm open to either possibility. I'm very open to the notion that this was paranormal in origin. And I'm also very open to the notion that it might not have been paranormal in origin. So that's my take as far as believing it or not. I keep, on the fence about that, unbiased.
Yeah, and I think that's the right attitude to have because I call myself a skeptic with an open mind. Yeah, and I investigate for things to find things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hope that they do happen. But if it's not recorded and you don't have the evidence, it's just a personal experience. It's just my word against yours, so to speak.
Yeah. You don't have any much to go on.
No, exactly.
But yeah, I am a researcher, but I also wear another hat, and that is the hat of a storyteller. I travel all around promoting and celebrating the legend of the Bell Witch by giving lecture events and telling all the different Bell Witch stories. And occasionally I will inject some of my research in there to make it more scary. And also after the events and the Q&A sessions, I share some of my research then. So I wear two hats.
Yeah,
I tell people, that I will sit there and tell them Bell Witch stories all night long. But then if I put on my researcher hat, I'm going to go down the list of stories and say, this is true, this is not true, this might have happened, might not have happened. So I wear two hats. So I've pretty much come to be basically a storyteller that knows how to read between the lines.
that makes sense. Yeah. So you mentioned the cemetery or the graveyard. So is there any evidence of the Bell family being buried there?
We have stories that have been handed down, and we have old accounts saying that they're buried there at the Bell graveyard, and the location is given. However, in the 1950s, the original gravestone of John Bell was stolen. Also, some of the other gravestones of some other family members had been stolen or vandalized. So the result was there was nothing there in terms of the Bell family. That was until 1957 when a descendant had a new gravestone made for John and Lucy Bell and placed in the Bell Cemetery. Now, that stone does not mark the precise location of where the Bells are buried, but they're buried nearby somewhere. The graveyard is in the woods, it's a thicket in the woods. What you will see, however, are a number of old field stones, and those field stones are believed to mark the graves of some of the family's slaves who worked on the farm. And that Bell graveyard is part of the property that's owned by that trust and the Bell family. And it's, of course, off limits to any trespassing.
Okay. So all the time that you've
Excuse me.
been all the time that you've been investigating this and researching this, do you have kind of one piece of documentation or information that you find the most compelling?
Well, when we say compelling, are you asking, do I have something that proves what everything exactly was, or some ideas to what might have actually happened? Theories.
Oh, it's yeah, because obviously with it being so long ago, it's very and like you said, there's a lot of folklore stories that have now got intertwined.
Right.
So
And
let's go.
I
Yeah,
don't think
so let's go with the
any,
latter.
anybody's going to find any documentation that says exactly what happened at Red River to cause the Bell Witch legend to come in existence, or at least not prove it. But there are some theories out there. There are, a lot of them that don't make sense that have been debunked. There's some that, could hold water. As for my own, in the past, I've introduced two theories, and one is paranormal and one is human. The paranormal theory, which is very long, probably too long for us to cover here, essentially boils down to certain things being done on or near the Bell farm or throughout the community, which opened up a portal. And the portal, this entity slipped through, or multiple spirits slip through. And that one, because this thing, first of all, exhibited the characteristics of many different paranormal entity types, the theory is that there was one spirit above all the rest that conjured or controlled these other entities and what they would do at different times. But it all boils down to a portal theory. As for the human theory, the one I introduced was that the children's school teacher, Professor Richard Powell, devised and orchestrated the whole thing. He had reason to, he had a fondness for young Betsy. The father did not like the idea of that because of the age difference there. And the father did end up dying. And looking at the old early accounts, you see all these stories of this entity saying some very, very intelligent things. And that school teacher, who seemed to always be around when something happened, was known to be a very well educated man. Some have said, at least one educator I know of has said, that if he were alive today, his knowledge level would put him at the level of a genius.
Right.
And he also had the gift of gab. He could talk to anyone and make them feel comfortable. He was a pleasure to talk with. People didn't mind sharing secrets with him, other things about their lives, because he was a very trusted man. He was the school teacher. And, that theory is a human theory that, he wanted more than anything in the world to marry Betsy. He would do whatever it took to do that. Betsy's father was in the way of that. Some of her brothers weren't too keen on it either. And also, Betsy, who is the youngest daughter, by the way, during the latter part of the legend, had a little relationship or courtship going with some local boy there and had announced her engagement to him. And looking back at the early accounts of the legend, this entity kept telling Betsy over and over, do not marry Joshua Gardner. Well, if the school teacher had a crush on this little girl, which I definitely would consider inappropriate and pretty creepy. I think it's I think it's pretty fair to assume that he would not want Betsy marrying somebody else. So there's that. And that was the human theory that I put forward. I do stand by both theories. I think both hold a lot of water and either one could very well explain what occurred on the Red River over 200 years ago. And there are other theories. There are other theories out there. There's one I'm working on right now, or that I have completed work on, which I'm unable to share for various reasons. I can't share it right now anyway.
Sure.
But, that takes a completely different angle to this, where we're no longer categorizing theories as either paranormal or human, but adds a whole new category and a theory. And more on that will come later this year.
That sounds interesting. But it would certainly make sense if there's the school teacher, for example, if he's got a soft spot for Betsy and he doesn't want anybody else involved, it would kind of, in modern day, it would be that manipulation of that individual to turn others, to turn her against others, so that he was the only one that could have her to himself. So that, now we know what we know from today's world. That would make perfect sense, looking at it logically.
Yeah, well, another thing to that human theory there, the man's education. He was smart enough to pull it off.
Yeah,
And I think he had the gift of gab and the social skills to possibly involve a couple other people, possibly. I don't know that he could have done it by himself.
yeah,
Now, another thing you have to look at, some of these things, there's no way he could have done. But then again, some of those early accounts have been disproven and debunked and all that. And we know they didn't happen and couldn't have happened. For example, the story about the man walking through the woods and encountering a rabbit the size of a human and having a conversation with that rabbit, or that some neighbor was had the had bad feelings for the Bell family and like put a curse on them and started working black magic. That's probably the most bizarre, idiotic theory I've ever heard. And her name was Kate Batts, and that one was debunked uh, almost 25 years ago.
right.
So, there's a lot of things in the Bell Witch story that no one could have been behind or done. But the
Now,
core part of it, or the main driver to the whole legend, could have been pulled off by one or more people, well, two or more people, especially if one of those people had the education and social skills that Professor Powell possessed.
100%. So the when you sort of like you Google the Bell Witch, it also comes out with the Blair Witch. So is the Blair Witch based on the Bell Witch, or is it just because it sounds similar, or very similar spelling, that the two stories have now got joined for no apparent reason?
No, it's not based on the Bell Witch at all. Where that got started, if I remember correctly, there was a precursor to the Blair Witch Project movie. I think it was a documentary video or something called The Curse of the Blair Witch. And in that, somebody made reference to the Bell Witch. Well, then the Blair Witch came out. So everybody started looking for the Blair Witch on the internet. Instead, they found Bell Witch. And at the time, there was only one website on the internet that was fully devoted, page after page, to the Bell Witch legend and researching it. And that was my site, www.bellwitch.org, which is
Yeah,
still around and in full swing today. So the Blair Witch came out. I received a lot of emails people asking, okay, the Bell Witch, the Blair Witch, is it the same thing? Did the Bell Witch inspire the Blair Witch? And then a lot of emails to the effect of, man, you need to take down this Bell Witch website because all you're doing is stealing the Blair Witch. And, I'm responding, you bumbling idiot. The Bell Witch has been around for almost 200 years. I did not steal the Bell Witch from your silly Blair Witch. Yeah, it was crazy.
That was stupid.
But yeah, and of course then you had the ones come back and say, "Well, you need to be more humble." And good Lord, I try to be humble, but and I think I am. A lot of people have said I'm very humble, but there is this certain personality type where they have a very low tolerance for, let's say, misinformation, people being uninformed, and things like that. And, sometimes it can really, really tick me off. Somebody accuse me of something, they don't even know what the heck they're talking about. But, on the other hand, it doesn't surprise me because anyone who is an author and a researcher, especially on something controversial, which would mean anything paranormal and like the Bell Witch, they're going to have all kinds of people accusing them of everything under the sun and calling them every name in the book. I knew that when I got into it, and I didn't have any problem with it. That's just part of it. It
Yeah.
comes with it.
Oh, for sure. So we are coming towards the end, but have you encountered any resistance or, apart from what you've just said, negative reactions to your stories about the Blair Witch?
Okay, the Blair Witch or the Bell Witch?
Sorry, the Bell Witch.
Oh,
Sorry. See,
okay.
getting
Yeah,
confused now.
don't get me started on the Blair Witch.
Yeah, on the Bell Witch. Sorry.
Yeah, because the Blair Witch, I left the theater and kept asking the person, "Where's the freaking witch? Where is it? I just saw a bunch of kids running through the woods screaming. I mean, how?
Yeah,
What is that?"
I've never watched it.
Okay,
So.
reactions.
Yeah, any resistance or negative reactions to your writing on the Bell Witch?
Absolutely, all the time, and that's just part of it. When you're writing, first of all, when you've been researching something for almost 50 years and writing about it, promoting it, celebrating it, and at the same time digging deeper and deeper into the research and publishing your findings, and it's something controversial like the Bell Witch, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be your followers. They're going to love your work. But you're also going to have a lot of naysayers, people who just don't care for what you're doing. You know, like, for example, sometimes things like that. Well, most of the time, let me just put it this way and put it bluntly. Some of the worst things and most outlandish accusations and misjudgments I've ever heard, most all of those that are real severe, come from competitors. Think of Wendy's talking nasty about McDonald's or
Right. Yeah.
Coca Cola talking nasty about Pepsi. They're invalid complaints and whatever you want to call them. They're invalid because of the source. The source has a vested interest into trying to tear down everybody else but themselves in an attempt to make themselves look better. So if I get some email that's really severe or hear some kind of really bizarre rumor, I say, well, I wonder when he's going to be coming out with his Bell Witch book. And then sure enough, you know, a few months later, a new Bell Witch comes out, which is a copy and paste of my own Bell Witch book, but yet goes around dogging me. And that just happens.
Yeah.
And it's highly unethical and highly unprofessional in the book industry to do that. But that's just the way some people do it. They, instead of submitting their work and become successful on their own ethics and merits and their own integrity and the quality of the work, they just throw whatever they have out there, and then they steal from some established researcher. And then after they sell the book or give the lecture based on information that was found by that researcher, they go around dogging that researcher.
Yeah, yeah,
I had, it happens, but, are you still there?
yeah. I'm still here. Yeah,
Can you still see me okay?
your camera's just gone off.
Let me try to fix that. My thumb accidentally turned off my phone, I think.
I can still hear you. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm having to hold this
That's
phone
okay.
sideways, and I have a little bitty fat fingers. So anyway, with the research, that's the way it goes, and it's not all
Yeah,
directed toward me at all. Other Bell Witch researchers and authors, they have their fan clubs too, and they have their hate clubs too. I've heard a lot of nasty things about them as well.
yeah. Makes sense.
But having done this almost 50 years and really worked hard to get that research out there, spent a lot of time and money getting the research out there and working hard to deliver as good of events as I can and all that, doing it year after year, for that many years, certain good things are going to come from it. And sometimes not everybody's going to understand why,
Yeah,
and it just goes back to experience and longevity. And anybody can achieve the same thing. You just got to get on it, make a commitment to work at it, and stick with it.
for sure. So, apart from this project that you can't mention, what's next on the agenda for Pat?
Well, next on the agenda, I have some events coming up later on in the year. I have it's the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo. I believe that's in September up in Mayfield, Kentucky. I have Goblin Con, which is I think a resurrection of the Goblin Con festival that they used to have all the time up there near Hopkinsville, Kentucky. They're doing that this year in October. I also have a couple of events coming up down in Mississippi. There's very strong Bell Witch connections down there and a lot of interest in it there. Also, I've got some other conferences and conventions. Oh, and also the Arkansas Paranormal Expo the last weekend of October. I'll also be presenting at that. So, very busy year. And like I say, I have completed a theory, a new theory. In fact, not even a theory. I've been told that it's actually a breakthrough, but I don't know. But it's going to change the way a lot of people look at the Bell Witch legend.
Well, I'm definitely going to look forward to that. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there will be a surprise coming up later in the year, which I'll talk about probably not too long from now.
I'll definitely look forward to that. Okay, Pat, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like I say, I love talking about completely different subjects, and your subject has been something that not many people have touched on. So, to have your time tonight, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I thank you very much. And I hope you have a great rest of the evening.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much. It's been an honor to be on here. You've had some really great questions. I've really enjoyed talking to you. So you take care, and I hope we can see each other again sometime.
Most definitely. Probably at a convention.
There you go.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Pat. Take care. Bye bye.